Good morning. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. My name is Mary Johnson, and I will welcome you to the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Morning Forum. Okay, we also have facilitators Laura McClatty, Carlenia Ivory Canty, Jackie Walton Edwards, Nathalie McElrath, who is our timekeeper, Winston Robinson, Steve Johnston, and Sharitha Cheryl. We always begin with a prayer, and Ms. Cheryl will give us our prayer this time.
Would you join me as we pray, please? Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for today, and we're thankful for each other. We're thankful to have our representative present to us as she executes her duties as she sees fit for us, her constituents. We're thankful for our neighbors, for our city, for our county, and for our state. For these, our United States. What a beautiful day to avail ourselves of the information offered in this forum. May it make us more informative citizens as we venture to make our living spaces better places to live. Bless our nation, bless our country, bless our county, city, communities, and bless our homes and neighborhoods. It's in your Son Jesus' name we pray. Let us say together, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Our forum runs from 8:30 until 10 o'clock. However, we do pause at 9:45 for announcements. If you have written announcements, you can send those to Steve at sjohnston@tuesdaymorningforum.org. Do we have any first timers? Anyone here for the first time? Oh, Kim. We know you, Kim. Okay. Following the presentation, we will take questions, but you have to raise your hand and we'll call on you in the order that you raise your hand. And also keep in mind that we do have people who are watching this virtually. So there's more than just this group of people. We're reaching many, many people in the virtual space. Our guest today is our 12th Congressional District Congresswoman, Alma Adams. She is a champion and a leader of HBCUs. She was able to secure multi-millions of dollars for our HBCUs during the pandemic. She's also a champion of Black maternal health for African American mothers and women of color, the Black farmers, the education, labor, and financial services, among many, many other accolades that I could say about her, as she represents us so wonderfully in Congress, in the U.S. Congress. So without further ado, we will have Congresswoman Alma Adams.
I am Congresswoman Alma Adams, your Congresswoman, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to be here at the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Forum. It's the last week of the August district work period. Technically, it is a committee week, and it's been a blessing to get back out in the community to visit with so many people, whether it's through night out or forums like this one. But I did bring you greetings today on behalf of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, our Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, our Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, our Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, as well as Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who is Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and our 58 members. We're known as the conscience of the Congress. And of course, we need a conscience in the Congress. But however, more important than greetings of this morning, that it's more important for us to just give thanks. Of course, we give thanks that the Lord has allowed all of us to be here today. Certainly, I thank Him for my life, for my health, and for my strength, and for all of you. But I personally want to thank Ms. Sarah and the Forum leadership for for the many years and the things that they do to bring our community together. 40 years, I understand, you've been together, but 2 years ago this month, I gave a speech on from the House floor honoring Miss Sarah, and at that time, I said perhaps the greatest honor that she continues to bestow on us and the entire Charlotte community is wisdom. Clearly, we have all benefited from her wisdom. So I want to thank Ms. Sarah for working for justice, for freedom and peace, and for blessing so many people with enough foolishness to believe that we can make the impossible possible. And so let me tell you that you have to be blessed with a lot of foolishness to want to serve in Congress. But for me, having served now in local, state, and now at the federal level, clearly it's been for me all about service. It is indeed the rent that we pay for living on this earth. But I do want to personally thank each of you for reaching out with your well wishes last month. A couple of weeks ago, I finally got COVID after three years or more of not getting it, but most likely because I was traveling internationally due to my congressional activities. But for the most part, the replies that I got would be what you would think. Get well soon, get some good rest. Hope you're doing what you should do. Those are the things that we would expect, but unfortunately, there were many responses that mocked the efficacy of vaccines and boosters. And while we as policymakers and community leaders understand that the COVID-19 viruses and variants are rapidly changing, and that breakthrough cases are generally milder thanks to inoculation, many people either can't or they just don't want to understand this. But unfortunately, I think this is due to the polarized partisanism that we see today and that we live in. With over half of the country, when they look at the top secret classified documents that we've all seen on TV on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, and they say nothing to see here, well, it's pretty clear to me that we are living in two different realities. But however, as a member of Congress, I can't allow partisanism and politics to get in the way of passing legislation. And so I spent my time trying to create the relationships that I needed to get the work done for you, for the residents of this district. And so it's hard sometimes to overcome that partisan divide. But I continue to believe that the solutions to our country's challenges don't belong exclusively to any political party. And that's why I work with Republican congressmen from Arkansas, Representative French Hill, who serves with me as the co-chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, with what we call the Congressional Black, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, the Congressional Bipartisan Historically Black Colleges and Universities, which we call HBCUs. And so along with Representative Hill, we have Senator Tim Scott, South Carolina, and Representative Mike Turner from Ohio in our leadership. These are all Republicans who may have HBCUs in their district, but who understand the value and the importance. And so we've worked together now for almost 8 years. We signed up over half of Congress, including many Republicans, for my Ignite HBCU Excellence Act, which I have copies today. I would like for you to take an opportunity to look at that, give some calls to our senators, to all the members of the Education Committee, so we can do what we know we need to do for our schools. But contrary to popular belief, you hear people say all the time, well, you can't get anything done. Well, we are getting some things done. Just this term, if you've been keeping up with things, we passed the American Rescue Plan Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act that we call the IRA, which passed just a few weeks ago, which is going to benefit not only our community, but communities all across this country. And for those of you who may not know, the Inflation Reduction Act is the greatest investment in fighting climate change ever. And so it's going to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 40%, below the 2005 level by 2030. Now that means that we're going to meet the goals that President Biden set out for us to meet at the end of this decade. So we're going to get to it before the end of this decade. So the Inflation Reduction Act invests also in healthcare. It brings costs down for American families. And so if you're on Medicare like me, we finally put a cap on the annual out-of-pocket expenses that you'll have to pay for prescription drugs, which means that annually, the maximum cost that you'll pay is $2,000. For those who are Medicare recipients, and we've capped insulin at $35 a month. Now, I'm a diabetic, I'm on insulin, but I do take medication for diabetes. But in the wealthiest country in the planet, you shouldn't have to choose between putting a roof over your head or affording the prescriptions, the life-saving prescriptions that you need. And so this legislation is paid for with common sense provisions. You know, for so long, so many people at the very top of the scale have never paid the taxes that they should pay. And so we are asking the wealthiest billion-dollar corporations to pay a minimum tax of 15%. Now, I haven't heard a lot of those wealthy people complaining about it. I hear a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle complaining about it. But we are making companies that buy back their own stock pay a 1% excise tax. And like I said, we've been hard at work in Congress over the past 2 years, from the child tax credit cuts to job creating infrastructure projects to assistance for Black farmers to competitive grant programs to unlock opportunities for minority and disadvantaged communities. And so there's a lot in these laws that I mentioned. A lot of that, a lot of what's in there will certainly benefit our families. And now, not everything with the American Rescue Plan was perfect. Actually, not everything that we do in Congress is perfect. And this is why we need you, our stakeholders, to remind us of what it is we need to do and where it is we need to go. First of all, we could not fund the child tax credit forever. You know, we did that during the pandemic. Hopefully people benefited from it. But when we came back to renew it, every Republican and 2 Democratic senators said no. So that's why it did not get renewed. Additionally, as some of our affordable housing partners can attest, the ARP, American Rescue Plan, rescue funds couldn't be used for most affordable housing projects. And if you live here in the city of Charlotte, in the county of Mecklenburg, you know that housing is a tremendous need. As a matter of fact, I think if my numbers are right, we have about 300 or 400 that it's 1,000%. 300 or 400,000 people who need housing. And so what I did, I went to David Browser, President Browser. You may or may not know him, but he's a North Carolina congressman. He represents the eastern part of the state. And so we put together a bill called the Lifeline Act. And clearly, that's really what it does. It unlocks over $8 billion across the United States. $8 billion is really kind of just sitting there that we couldn't use because of the restrictions. And so the law that we now have gained a lot of support and co-sponsors, and due to the bill and the advocacy from housing stakeholders, from the Treasury Department, who unlocked those billions of dollars, that then lowered the cost of housing money that's going to be used to create tens of thousands of affordable housing units across the entire country. And that is a big deal because we know that housing is very, very critical. But that's not enough, though. Housing, affordable housing is one of the biggest issues in Charlotte. And so that's why I work on the 4 H's, and housing is one of my 4 H's, along with healthcare, along with hunger and higher education. And so I want you to know that as a member of the Financial Services Committee, which I am so pleased to serve on with Congresswoman Maxine Waters, is fondly called Auntie Max. Very serious she is about housing, but I'm working to address legislation there that deals with the commercial landlord crisis in Charlotte. Now, when families can't compete with corporations who buy up with cash these houses, our families get priced out of housing and of the market. And so their family then loses security and economic opportunity that comes with owning a home. And we know that that's how we can move forward economically, by owning property. And so unless we do something now, that problem is going to exacerbate and it's going to continue to get serious. Another one of my 4-H's is healthcare. You know, I grew up with a mom who did domestic work. She cleaned houses so I could get a good education. She wasn't able to complete high school. She didn't go to an HBCU or any CU for that matter, but she was smart enough to know that education would be my pathway and the pathway for her children. And so, not having health care, having a sick sister who was diagnosed very early with sickle cell, we got our health care by going to the emergency room. This is why I work so hard to make sure that not only our residents, but folks have health care, because health care is needed. And so I find it important to talk about the work of the Black Maternal Health Caucus. And it was mentioned that I started that caucus, co-chairing it now with Representative Underwood, who is a nurse, the youngest Black woman in the Congress from the Chicago area. And so the Black Maternal Health Caucus is, when we look at what happened in COVID, a lot of our mothers, Black mothers, mothers of color, really had a difficult time because it changed the world for them. COVID changed the world pretty much for all of us in some kind of way. But a good friend of mine gave birth to her first child during the pandemic, and despite having great health insurance, top of the line care, she didn't have an easy pregnancy or delivery. It would have been easy, undoubtedly, if she'd been able to interact in terms of normal prenatal care with her doctors and visits from her family and her friends. But because of COVID, she was not able to do that. But luckily, she made it home. Beautiful daughter, just turned 2 years old a week ago. She also had another advantage that is statistically shown to lead to better maternal health outcomes. She is a white woman. And so, again, you see the disparity and the problems that we have. But Black maternal mortality and morbidity, in fact, is significantly higher in the United States. And as you know, the maternal health outcomes in our country pale in comparison to other wealthy nations. So let me repeat that. In the United States, one of the richest countries in the world, the state of maternal health generally, and Black maternal health specifically, is a crisis. You probably heard me give those statistics many times before. We're going to keep talking about it until we get the problem resolved. If you compare that with Norway, 2019, Norway had 0 maternal deaths, 0. Now, we can do better. We should do better. We need to do better, and we can. Even folks like Beyonce and Serena Williams, bless her heart, experience the dangers of birthing while Black. Some of the richest, some of the most powerful women in the world almost succumb not to COVID, not to cancer, but to childbirth. So imagine if Serena Williams had missed the opportunity to play in the US Open just because a doctor didn't know how to deliver treatment to a Black body. You know, maternal health is an issue without a doubt tied to racial health and housing disparities. And so the historical and structural institutional racism has worked to deny Black parents the ability to have stable housing and economic independence. All of those things are interrelated. So when I think about these inequities, I'm reminded of some of the most profound words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we lost 54 years ago. And in the 1966 Convention of Medical Committee for Human Rights, King said, of all of the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and the most inhumane. healthcare is not equal in our country. It never has been. So we shouldn't be surprised that when the inequity extends to mothers and their children. So it's no surprise to us. Even before the pandemic, we had issues with folks not being able to get health care, with disparities in our communities. And so that's why we need policy solutions like the Black Maternal Health Momnibus. And I love that word because it's about mommies, it's about babies. And so let me make it clear. The Black maternal health crisis is preventable. And I just believe if things are preventable, we need to get ahead of it so that we don't have these problems. So Congress needs to pass the omnibus, they need to pass Medicaid expansion, and so does the state of North Carolina. Think about it, 400, 500,000 people in our state don't have health care who could have it because this General Assembly, which I served down there for 20 years, so I know that crowd, they have not expanded Medicaid. And as a result, we have people still suffering today who have never been able to see a doctor. So this Black maternal health crisis is preventable. Now, we need to not only, as I said, pass Medicaid expansion, because many of these deaths are preventable. Over 50% of them are. There is no excuse for inaction. And so we can save these lives. We can close that maternal mortality and morbidity gap between not only Black and white Americans, but also between the United States and the rest of the world. Now, we can and we gotta fight for a future where our mothers and our babies are given the tools that they need for good health. On the issue of hunger, my next stage, food insecurity. I am working to make sure that my role as vice chair of the Agriculture Committee to address this critical issue of hunger. We have 165,000 folks in our immediate area who go to bed hungry every night. 50,000 of those are children. That's not a partisan issue. When your belly is aching because you need to eat, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, or whether you have no party affiliation at all. And so I reintroduced my bill, closing the meal gap, to strengthen SNAP benefits, to so that no family, no person, no child will go hungry. But don't take my word for it. The Food Research and Action Center says that the closing the meal gap, which we have found, will address SNAP's key shortcomings, which is the inadequacy of benefits. And so the evidence shows that SNAP plays a critical role in alleviating poverty, in reducing food insecurity, and improving health and well-being. Now, however, inadequate benefits severely limit the program's ability to do even more to address these issues. Now, benefits for most of our households are not enough to get them through the entire month without hunger or being forced to sacrifice nutrition quality. And so the research is clear. Most adequate SNAP benefits improve participant food security, economic security, nutrition, health, and performance in school. You all remember Governor Jim Hunt. Jim Hunt was referred to as the education governor. And he used to say that children have to come to school ready to learn. If you're hungry, if you're left home hungry, if you don't have food, but that's one of the reasons why you are not ready to learn. But so we have to pass this crucial bill. And as vice chair of the Ag Committee, we're working hard to make sure in our next farm bill, which we're beginning to talk about now, we're going to be able to push it forward. And finally, let me speak to our education. You all know that 40 years I was a professor and I taught. Matter of fact, people ask me, do you miss teaching? Do you miss? And I tell them, no, I miss my students, or even though they're in touch with me with all the technology. But I have an opportunity to teach each and every day in the halls of Congress, and I'm continuing to do that. But let me just say, in terms of higher education, which is my fourth H, we're working on what we started right before former President Trump left office. He signed the Future Act. That was a bill that I sponsored, which yielded $155 million for MSIs and HBCUs, 86 million of those dollars to HBCUs that we don't have to ask for each and every year. But so with the Future Act, now we're trying to pass Ignite. As I said before, I gave you a handout, because Ignite will fund institutions like Johnson C. Smith University, so that we can continue to build that pipeline of diverse talent to every sector of our community. Furthermore, on Thursday, just the day after tomorrow, I'll be announcing the 100th HBCU Partnership Challenge Partner. For those of you who don't know, the challenge is led by the Congressional Bipartisan HBCU Caucus and my office. And so the challenge is looking for partners that want to make our HBCUs an integral part of their overall corporate agenda. Not at the bottom of their workforce, but at the top. And so we want partners to look at our schools as a foundation for hiring diverse talent and making their company more diverse. If you're looking for diversity, people are talking about that now, diversity and inclusion, but you must look at HBCUs. That is the pipeline, and that's where the tremendous talent is. And so, one of the things I want to mention is that the bomb threats. Because just last week, 2 bomb threats were levied at Howard University, and which is unacceptable. It's an interruption of the academic life. It's an interruption socially for these young people. It's an interruption for them mentally, and for their parents as well. And so, since January, many historically Black colleges and universities received threats. I think it was something like 47 across our country, including schools in North Carolina. In February, JCSU received a threat of violence. Now, these to me are acts of terror. And so they have now entered the second academic year. Most of our schools just opened last week. So if you think about it, your parents coming, dropping these students off, and then these students having to get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because a bomb threat comes in. They're out of their dormitories until 4:30 and so forth. Now, like all academic institutions, HBCUs are still recovering from the academic disruptions of COVID. If you think about it, we had to send students home, we had to make sure that they could study and learn from home and so forth. So it's a burden for our faculty and for our students and our staff as well. And so our schools, you know me, I'm HBCU strong. I don't mince any words about it. It was an HBCU that took this poor Black girl in and molded and shaped me into what I could become. And so I've then made an investment as a member of Congress to our schools. And so our schools they deserve better. So over the past 2 weeks, I have been on the phone with members of Congress and members of the President's Cabinet, including just the other day with Secretary Cordon, and pressing them to make addressing these threats a priority before it happens to Howard, to JCSU, or to any other HBCU. And finally, I want to thank President Biden for not only forgiving the $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan debt, although I had a bill along with some of my colleagues for $50,000. But I think canceling the debt was a good thing to do. Even canceling the debt for those students who went to predatory institutions, who basically robbed them of their money. And so they were cheated out of their education. And so this was a way to really try to help them get back on track. So we've recovered a lot, but I've covered a lot, let me just say, and I know that you all probably have some questions, but let me just mention one other thing. And that was the recent Supreme Court case, the Dobbs decision. And whatever you think or believe about women's rights and reproductive justice, abortion care is still legal in the state of North Carolina. And so that Dobbs decision doesn't change that. But furthermore, while some judges and justices and state legislators have made it clear that their next steps include rolling back rights and that we've had the right to contraception and family planning, the right to marriage equality, and many more still exist, even if they are under attack. They still exist. However, At the federal level, that's where Congress comes in, from reproductive care to LGBTQ rights to contraceptives. Congress has a responsibility, I believe, to stop state governments from rolling back our rights. Now, what we have now is a state by state action, which is to me a problem. A right that we have in North Carolina, I think we should have in South Carolina or any other state. So that's why I voted for and the House passed the Right to Contraception Act, which will establish a statutory right to obtain contraceptives and for healthcare providers to be able to provide them, not put people in jail for. But I mean, some of that stuff is just absolutely fool and ridiculous. But it protects Americans from state and local legislation that would deny people access to contraceptives. And that's why I was trying to sponsor Respect for Marriage Act, which is gaining bipartisan traction in the Senate. And so it's going to protect interracial marriage and same-sex marriage as well. Now, still over 100 of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle voted against interracial marriage. So that's why I supported ensuring the woman's right to protective freedom. It's going to protect somebody's constitutional right to move freely between states to seek care, as well as the Women's Health Protection Act, which would enshrine the protections that were first guaranteed by Roe v. Wade more than 50 years ago. And so I care deeply about these issues, and from my work as a state legislator to my leadership as co-founder and co-chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus in Congress. So let me be clear, our granddaughters shouldn't have fewer rights than our daughters, and our daughters shouldn't have fewer rights than we have. So that's why I was willing to get arrested this summer, why I stand up for these rights, and I'll do it again. And thank you all for calling to try to get me out of jail, but I was fine. But I also know that this can be a very emotional and personal subject. And so in order to be successful in Congress, I have had to work with people who sincerely disagree with me on issues like abortion and maybe some others. Maybe all of them don't agree with me about HBCUs. But because in spite of the challenges, it's my honor. It is truly my honor to serve the 12th Congressional District and each of you in Congress. As I said, when I open services, indeed the rent we pay for living on this earth. And I want you to know that I'm going to try to do everything I can to keep my rent fully paid up. And I thank you for this opportunity. I'll be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Of course, Tommy has the first question. Who's it? Winston, Tommy, Winston, Pam, and Blanche.
Thank you for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. But I have several questions, but I'm only allowed one. That is healthcare. You know, one of the biggest myths in the world that America has one of the best healthcare system. I've been to other places that have better healthcare system. And why can't Congress sit in, why can't we concentrate on community healthcare centers like we have in Europe and places like that, instead of going to the emergency room, sitting up for 5 or 6 hours waiting on basic healthcare like colds and stuff like that? Why can't we have healthcare centers in each community to address small problems and use the emergency room for emergency problems?
Well, thank you for your question. I absolutely agree with you. We should have that. We have, and I will tell you that the Congressional Black Caucus has made many proposals to do that. There are 58 of us. Of course, we have many other people who have to agree with us. But I think in terms of what we have in terms of laws that will benefit people are based on who your lawmakers are. And let me just say that again. What we can accomplish for the citizens of our state, citizens of this area, for citizens of America, will depend on who is making decisions. And so I just have to say when good people go and vote for good people to elect them, good people make good decisions, based on what those folks need. And so that's really it. We have to convince. I have one vote. I have a responsibility to try to levy other votes from members of the House and the Senate, which is why I do work in a bipartisan way and a bicameral way. But we have to have more people. And so I would just say that we have to put the pressure on. We've got to let people know what we want. That is a wonderful idea. And it should be a reality for not only our community of North Carolina and our community of Charlotte, Mecklenburg, but it should be available for every community. You're right, in other places. My mother and I should not have had to get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the emergency room because we didn't have the kind of health care that would allow me to have those centers. Which is why I'm so very pleased about what C.W. Williams does. Work with suites and programs that they have. We have provided funding. Let me just tell you that. We had, we had 19 programs. We had, I'm trying to think of the number now, but it was millions of dollars that came into our community to support things like that. But I think in order to have it universally, it's got to be an action of the Congress and not left up to state legislators, although they can do something. And our state legislators may be better about that. But if we're talking about making it universal, having it everywhere, which we should, you shouldn't have to go to another state to get the care that should be provided here in North Carolina. And so, but in order to do that, we've got to have consensus. That means that I've got to get enough people to vote with me, and not just in my chamber in the House, but then we've got to send it over to the Senate as well before it can then pass. And once it does, it goes to the president's desk. And if we have a president who doesn't like it, if the bill gets to his desk or her desk, once we get point is, if the bill gets there, they are required, if they don't sign it, they can leave it 30 days, it becomes law. So when I'll just say, in terms of that former president, he signed the bill, it's gonna become law anyway. So thank you for your question.
Good morning, Congresswoman. My question is, thank you for being here. It's an honor. My question is based around, so America is a litigious state. And a residual effect of that is, as a society, we keep impeccable records. Therefore, if you do enough digging, if you have the will to do enough digging, you can pretty much find the answers to anything you wanted to know. About a decade ago, the state of Maryland did that with the 4 HBCUs that are publicly funded. I wanted to know, would it hinder or help this bill, given that a large percentage of HBCUs are in the super racist South, if we all of those states decided to do the digging that Maryland did to see those inequities, how would it affect this bill?
Thank you for your question. We've done the digging. We know what the problems are. I have been shouting it along with members of the CDC and members of the Congressional Bipartisan for a long time. We have 219 co-sponsors on this bill. That's half of the Congress, that's half of the chamber. So this bill needs to be marked up. Once it's marked up, then it will come to the floor and we can have an opportunity to debate it. But if you look on the back, you'll see all of the people who sponsoring this bill. Okay, so it's not just Alma Adams' bill, but we already know. Just as Maryland knew what was going on. And let me give you another example in terms of what's going on in North Carolina, because I served in North Carolina House for 20 years. And we tried to consistently get, even for our 1890 HBCUs, those are schools of agriculture. There are 19 of them across the country. There's one in North Carolina, that's my alma mater, North Carolina A&T, although I love JCSU, they adopted me and I represent them here. But the 1890s were founded in 1890 by the Morrill Act. because in 1862, when the agricultural schools came on board, were funded by the federal government, they didn't have any black schools. And you know, we've been doing agriculture all our lives. And so it was 1890 before we could get in. But the law says that when we get that funding, when the federal government provides the funding, the state has a responsibility to match the dollars. So if we give $1 million, the state should give $1 million. North Carolina has been derelict in that. Now, recently, they've tried to do some things. And I did talk to our land grant institution, North Carolina A&T, and at one time, and the other School of Agriculture is North Carolina State. Okay? Two great schools of agriculture, one black, one non. And so the School of Agriculture at North Carolina, at the University at North Carolina State, received a match 6 times. North Carolina A&T received a match 75%. Now, that's a very blatant inequity. But what has to happen, we have to have legislators who are continuing to press that and to press their colleagues to make sure that when the funding is distributed, that it's distributed equally. And let me go back to 180 years. Our first HBCU came on board in 1873. Cheney, I mean, I know my stuff here. I mean, that's all, not all that I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of that. But here again, for that period of time, in every sense of appropriations, our schools, whether they are 1890s or otherwise, our schools have not gotten equitable funding. Much of that, again, has to do with who's holding the purse strings and who's willing to give up the funding in an equitable way. That is, so we have to have not only cheerleaders out here like you, but we have to have cheerleaders who have been elected to serve to do their jobs. And there's no way, and when I was in the State House and I saw what was going on with the inequity here, I said to my colleagues, why are you all getting more than your share? And so it doesn't, we think about it. It's not that we don't have the money. If you can fund a school 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and you got to fund this one over here, not even 100%. It's where you place your priorities. That's really what it's about. And so we've got to get more vigilant in writing and texting, tweet, whatever it is you do to get the attention of people who are in the position of making policy, shaping policy. They've got to know that we have some expectations of you. And just because you got elected, whether I voted for you or not, you have a responsibility to our state, to our community, and to our schools. And that's what we have to do. So the research has been done. We know what the problems are. We know where the inequities are. And we just have not been brave enough to do what needs to be done. Yeah. Another question? Thank you so much for your question.
Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, how are you?
I am great. I want to thank you so much for your support for HBCUs, particularly Bennett. I'm a historian and I have written about the great Bennett women's basketball teams of the 1930s, best college women's team in the entire country. Marvelous. And I don't have a question. I just want to say this book here that is Legacy, 3 centuries of Black history in Charlotte, North Carolina. This copy is for you. I'll give it to you afterwards because I know you appreciate history and keep telling the truth about history is so important. So
Well, thank you. Bennett Bells did well.
Bennett Bell.
I served 40 years on that campus. I did my undergraduate and graduate work at North Carolina A&T. So HBCUs are seriously a part of not only my legacy, but my blood. And so thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to reading that.
Good morning, Congresswoman. Good evening and good night. My biggest question was going to be on homelessness and housing, but the question I really want to know about, and I thank the president and whoever did this for us, as for students' loans. And that we did get some money, but I'm not sure how that process is going to be as far as really getting that money. And since you're talking about, you know, our schools and everything and stuff, and those loans, because I had to do loans myself, because the thing about it is, there's nothing out there for our seniors. That's another piece of it too. It's a part two to it. So it's hard for us seniors to get anything, seem like, period. So just talk, I guess, talk about that student loan and how we can, if we're gonna get any more money, or if that's it, or what.
Well, I hope we do get some more, but we don't know, what else is coming. But I would certainly encourage, and let me just say that having that debt, young people leaving school, having that debt, not being able to purchase a home, a car, because you got those student loans, that is a problem. So you're living at home with your parents, you're in their basement, wherever. And sometimes we get old enough to retire and we're still paying off a loan. That's terrible. First of all, the interest, you know, I know, well, college education is not cheap, but it shouldn't cost that much. It shouldn't price you out. Now, that money will become available because they're gonna keep it deferred until, I guess, I think it's October, so if you're in deferment, then you're okay there. But then you'll be able to, if you went to school on a Pell Grant, then you are able to get canceled $28,000. If your income, I think it is what, under $125,000, okay, then you're able to process. There is going to be a process that you go through, and you'll be able to get the $20,000 canceled from your loan. If you did not go to school on a Pell Grant, then $10,000 will be available for you to get canceled from the loan. That's what we have right now. Of course, you know, this was an initial promise that the president made, was running for office. I think it was, we have some people who are not happy about it. They're probably, well, I won't say all of them, but many of them that I've talked to, they didn't have to worry about the student loan. They could pay, write a check for their kids to go to school. And then some of our parents taking on these parent plus things, which I think was a bad idea. The Congress moved that along before I came. But that has really caused some of our institutions, when they first put that in place, to lose students, because they were based now on whether the parents had paid their bills for a certain period of time consistently. So in my opinion, it really discriminated. And so, but we don't know what else is coming. We do have some bills in Congress. This is an action that the president took as sort of as an executive action. We might be able to get something passed on the House floor, don't know. But let's take advantage of that $10,000 and $20,000 right now when we can. So yeah, and if you have any additional questions, you can go to my website and we'll have some information on that. My district director, Louise Harvest, is here, and of course Kim from my staff and communications person, Sam Spencer. So either of those persons can help. So we're happy. But listen, we want these students, whether you're a young student or an old student, you got a student loan, you need to take advantage of that.
Okay. Jackie and then Kim.
Good morning, Congresswoman.
Good morning, how are you?
Thank you. On any mortgage application, there's going to be a question that asks you, do you owe any federal debt? So that really is affecting folks when it comes to home ownership. My question does have to do with housing. You mentioned the number 300,000, but I didn't.
No, I think I'm wrong on that. I think it was 300. 30,000, I'm sorry, I got the zero in the wrong place. I was an art major, not math. I'm sorry.
30,000 units in North Carolina. What, I didn't understand the context of that.
Well, we need, in other words, there's a tremendous need for housing right now. And even in our area of Charlotte, across the state is 30,000. Right here in Charlotte, it's 30,000.
Right.
Now, we see all of these, buildings going up, all these high rises, and, I just believe that housing, has to be, decent and affordable. We can build all we want, if people can't afford to live there. The mayor used to say, if you work in Charlotte, you should be able to afford to live in Charlotte, and I agree with that. So that's it. So what we're trying to do is to reduce that number down. I do want to give certainly praise to our city council for all the things that, in the funding that they put in, for housing to try, but it's a serious problem, and we're trying to, really dwindle down on those numbers, so that we can get people off the streets, so that, and all of the people without housing are not on the streets. They're living with people, other people, they're living with relatives, they're sleeping in cars, all those things that really, we don't want. Every person, in my opinion, should have decent, affordable housing. That enhances your quality of life. Every person should have health care. Every person should be able to put food on their table and feed their family. These, to me, are basic things, basic human rights. I tried to put that into the Constitution, but it's hard to change the Constitution. I think those things need to be there, and maybe we would do right. See that those things are needed. We shouldn't have children hungry. We shouldn't have families hungry. I mean, just think about all the lines you saw during the pandemic. It just unveiled so much of what was wrong, and it's still wrong. Yeah, but thank you for your question. And who was the next person?
Ken,
Ken,
and then the young lady, yeah.
Congresswoman, I am always enthralled, excited, and then I get an angry side when I hear you speak. Enthralled and excited by the level of expertise, knowledge that you have. And then I get angry because I don't see an avenue for getting that information out in mass numbers to people who could digest, understand, and act as necessary on that information. Like you mentioned, 75% of the 6 grants, and we were getting only 75% of it. I've been a journalist for 55 years in media and communications, and I'm always looking for the next story. And every time I hear you, I see and hear a story. The bottom line question is there in place or planning or even thoughts of some kind of way that we acquire and disseminate and keep in the forefront a lot of these informational things that you offer, because that the younger group doesn't have a clue. And a lot of it is because they don't know. And then some of those who know don't appreciate what you and others are telling them. So where is the opportunity, effort to try to put that forward? Because you, to me, are a remarkable woman, and I certainly appreciate and enjoy every time I sit and listen to you.
Well, thank you so much, and the Lord has blessed me. I am so grateful. He brought me from school board to Congress, and in those many years, for 38, 39, I've learned a lot. But let me just say, as a journalist, you probably know more than those young folks that you're talking about, because I'm not sure if your information is put out electronically, but I think we have to go to the sources to reach them. you know, I keep telling my staff, well, most of my staff is fairly young, right? And so they believe in texting and tweeting, and they got these cool signs. And I remember this is kind of personal, but it's really true. I was watching emails going across from my offices, two offices, one here and one in Washington, and the staff kept talking about. They said, well, ASA this, ASA that. So I finally got into the conversation. I said, well, what is ASA? They said, well, that's you. Those are my initials, right? They were talking about me. But that's what we do, you know, like LBJ and AFA, so that's kind of what they do on the Hill. But you're right. I think we do have to get not only the right information. We try to use our website, but people don't necessarily go to the website. They gotta go looking for something. And I will tell you that all of the folks who have been a part of the student loan process, they're gonna go looking for that. I think we look for what we want to find. So those of us who've been out here long enough, who have a platform like you, need to try to figure out where they are so we can go and get them, whether it's through some electronic means or whatever. I would certainly encourage you to talk to my communications director back there, saying he's got a new haircut today, Sam. Absolutely. You know, because that's what we do right now. But you're right. We've got to figure out, and we've got enough brilliant people in here, and those who are probably looking in, to give whatever ideas you have. Let me just say, send them to us on our website so that we can maybe figure out a way. There may be some new platforms that we can go to. I don't know them all. I think I'm doing pretty good with my phone and even some of the texting, and then they always usually just say, they'll say TX or that kind of thing. What is that? Thanks, I guess. Figure that kind of stuff. But thank you for your question. I think we have to look and really figure out where we can capture them. I have a grandson, my youngest grandson turned 21 yesterday. I want him to get the heck out of Howard this year. The tuition has gone up to $60,000. We're trying to make sure that he doesn't. So I'm trying to help my daughter and son-in-law, and you know, to get him out so that he's not bogged down with student loans, and we're not as well. So education is not cheap, but it shouldn't be that expensive. One of the things that I will tell you that I sit on the Ed Labor Committee, and we're getting ready to have we're getting ready to do a forum on the cost of college. You know, one of the things is we got to figure out why the cost is rising the way it is. Yeah, that's important.
Okay.
Yes.
Good morning, Congresswoman.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming. Addressing your hunger initiative. When you talk about increasing SNAP benefits, is there any discussion about increasing the income limits to receive those benefits, there's an income limit, and that limit seems to be at a level that most people can't possibly live at. But is there any discussion on increasing that income limit to make more people, because there are a lot of people that are just on the edge, and they are part of that, those that go hungry and are at food banks.
Yes, ma'am. We're looking at all of that. I also, on the Ag Committee, sit on the Nutrition Subcommittee. That's, yeah, I used to, well, I sat on that. Marshall Fudge chaired it. And so we have been continuing to look at that. That has probably surfaced more since COVID. So many people are still out of work. So many people don't want to go to work. I'm not sure we need to pay people what they deserve to be paid. That's one thing, and maybe people come to work. But we are looking at that. We're also, but the initial thrust for this bill and I've done several bills to do that. I started when I came into Congress, the Adams Hunger Initiative. We meet quarterly. We meet with all of the agencies that provide food services, whether they're food banks or what have you. Just did a tremendous job during COVID to really keep our families fed. And so that's, if it's not in this current bill that we're looking at for the farm bill, we'll certainly include that. If you have some suggestions about where you think the level ought to be, if you'll send those to me, we will include those in the bill. You know, getting legislation passed is really not that difficult if you can get people thinking the way you're thinking. And so you have to convince them, number one, that even if you are a member of the U.S. House or U.S. Senate, think about the fact that regardless of what your party affiliation is, hunger impacts everyone. And so there are folks in your district who are hungry. You know, so we try to present statistics for them. We go and do that research. This gentleman talked about, we do that research to let them know so that they feel some ownership. And then we get those people there. We single out the folks to get a call. If you send me what you think, we'll take a look.
Good morning again,
Yes.
Congresswoman. So I have an organization that throws large-scale community events to lure people, to connect them with life-enhancing resources. One of the resources we had on site at our last event was Bank of America, and they announced a program in which if you purchase a home, if you are a person of color and you purchase a home, and largely Latinx or Black communities, you can get it with no down payment. However, of course, being Black in America, there are a lot of reluctancies when we see things like that, especially from big corporate organizations. So how could the federal government provide, I guess, a safety net to approve or look over these programs to prevent long-term, to prevent what happened in 08 or prevent what happened many times before, where we end up catching the bad end of a deal that looked good on the front end?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. I want to go back to the Financial Services Committee, which I sit on with, chaired by Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and we talk about housing and those kinds of issues that impact our community all the time. And it was of particular interest during COVID, when we put out the PPPs and all those things, and people that we wanted to benefit, whether they were mom and pop organizations, small businesses, businesses that were unbanked, underbanked, that kind of thing, so that they would have an opportunity. And of course, as you saw, some of the big folks came in and they had all of the resources within their agencies to get those grants written and those kinds of things. So then we pulled back. But I would say we are the watchdogs for that. If there are, and we have meetings where we have these executives, if you will, to come in and we ask them questions. Now, if you feed those questions to us or those kinds of things that are problematic, but I think if we don't have statutes in place, we can certainly put them there. But there again, like everything else, we can't just wish that to go in. We have to get the support to do that. But I think in order to get the support, we have to build the rationale. By that, we have to have specific instances that we can document and use as documentation. So I think there are probably some, and we'll go back and I'll have my folks that work with me in that area take a look. But there are some things on the books right now. We just have to make sure that we can make all the laws, but we also have to make sure that they are followed, and sometimes they're not. But when we find out that they're not, that's when we can then get back into the game and, take people to task and so forth, so, yeah, but send me an email if you would. Okay, so we can make, I'm gonna have my folks to go and make sure, that, and I would suspect that many of them are listening, online. Especially some of my staff, who are not here today, those in Washington that handle, the legislative process.
Okay, yeah, my question, this is a question I have is, when did, black institution, or HBCUs, get so dependent on federal programs and government to fund them? You know, cause the reason they founded HBCUs primarily because we couldn't go to other institutions. You know, and so, I remember, I'm 75 years old, I remember when students.
So young brother, you
Yeah,
said.
I remember students and stuff came to churches and stuff, or is the black church involved in funding HBCUs anymore, or help funding HBCUs?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me just say, whatever dollars, our schools get from the federal government, from the state government, and even if we get some local dollars, you still, those dollars are still not enough, to really fund the education for that student. And a lot of times as parents, when we pay our tuition, we think that covers it, but it does not. And so I wouldn't say that we were dependent, we'd have more. We're not dependent on them. We're simply saying this is a matter of equity and fairness. Our students, our universities, our colleges deserve the same kind of support. Now, we don't have big endowments and some of the things that some of the other schools have. And yes, I think our churches are doing an excellent job of providing. Our schools were founded, and I tell my colleagues this all the time. I've had a very contentious debate. I tell them all the time, listen, you are an HBCU if you were founded from 1873 to 1960 to 65. If you were founded for the purpose of educating kids that look like me. Why? Because as you said, other schools were not open to us. And many of them today are, and our kids can go wherever they want. But those schools are not, they're PBIs and whatever, MSIs, etc. But they're not HBCUs. Our schools have a history that's very different. And so I try to get folks to recognize, I have a gentleman to say to me, and I won't call his name here, but he said, we have more black students going to our schools, whether they're Hispanic or whatever, than HBCUs. Well, first of all, there are more of you than there are us. There are only 101 HBCUs across the country anyway. But thank you for now opening your doors. That's fine. This bill, Ignite, is not about how many students have black, white, blue, or green. This bill is about providing for improving the infrastructure on these campuses that are almost 2 centuries old. Some of the buildings on these campuses are as old as the schools. Our students can't even live in some of them. Some of them are just boarded up. And I'm saying, you don't see that on these other campuses. They've got bigger endowments. The states are giving more money to them. The federal government. This is about fairness here. That's what this is about. Our schools are not dependent on any one person, any one entity. All of those things, all of those dollars that come in have to work. I just completed my endowment that I paid in about 4 years to North Carolina A&T. I just think that we have to, I spoke at 4 different graduations, HBCUs this past year. And I tell those young people, don't get it and go. Don't get that degree and go. Get it and give back. And that's the thing that's really not happening, I think, in many of our communities. We get it and go, and sometimes we don't even look back unless we're going to a homecoming or some other kind of festivity. And that we've got to think about somebody helped us along the way. Somebody reached back and walked with us. whether it was all of our families, I didn't have any money. My mother said, "You're going to college." I'm looking like, really, I think I'll pay for it, But so you have a community within your community that helped. And so, I would just encourage you to really reach back, everyone. And they cut me off, so I think my time might be up.
1837.
I don't know.
1837. But what did I say? Oh, okay. 1837, not 1873. I'm a little dyslexia or something. I'll get my numbers.
Right, and not even that, but if you're, you can send your children, if you wish, you can send your
That's
children.
right.
If
That's right.
Angelina Jolie can send her daughter to HBCU.
That's right.
And we can do the same thing. I
Mhm.
did anyway. Wait a minute, Ken. We have, Jackie and then Miko, Carlinia and Ken. Jackie, yes.
Regarding election disputes and what's going on now with the North Carolina legislature and the Supreme Court, can you just talk about that for a minute?
Well, I think what the Supreme Court did, basically was to give the rights over to the states. And I just think that's wrong. Because, we need to have national laws that impact you regardless of where you live and regardless of what state. I should not be able to speed or even if you look within communities. Listen, I shouldn't just get a ticket on my side of town. If I'm speeding, I should get a ticket on your side of town too. But I think the legislature is taking advantage and actually trying to put things in place that would really destroy our democracy. When you think about it, I mean, to want to control not only women but control our rights to marriage, even down to voting. We're still talking about voting rights here in 2022. We thought we had our rights, right? I had people calling me and saying, "Well, I thought we could always vote." Well, again, when you have policymakers who put restrictions and time limits on things and say, "Well, we're gonna let you have it for 25 years and then we're gonna come back and revisit," that should never happen. But so I don't know if I haven't followed each and every bill that the legislature is looking at, but from what I have seen, it's very destructive. It's going to create hardships for African Americans. It's going to create hardships for seniors to try to vote. And we should be working to make sure that everybody can have an opportunity to vote. We shouldn't be doing things to keep people from voting. And I think that's what's going on, because people are just, there's so much hatred. I mean, I've never seen so much of destructive thought as I've seen. And I've never seen that too much in my entire 76 years, but things change, but we want them to change for the better, not to make opportunities less for people. Yeah. And I think that's what was.
We got Miko, then Ms. Carlina Ivory, then Mr. Kuntz when he returns.
I just wanted to say thank you for advocating for your 4-H's and being approachable, because a lot of elected officials, they run from you, to come around when they want to vote. And I commend you for just being your authentic you and keeping us informed. And that's the biggest thing. And as a person with sickle cell trait, I appreciate that.
All right, Ms. Carlina.
Good morning.
Good to see you, Ms. Ivory. How are you?
I'm great. Could you talk a little bit, and then I'll wait. Winston, y'all need to listen, because I'm kind of having she talks.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you tell us and tell everybody about the monetary requirement for you to be in Congress? I think you mentioned, alluded to it one time. I'd like you to say that, and then I'll say what else.
Well, one of the things that in running for any office, and I certainly would encourage people, service is, it's a good thing to give back. But it's costly to do it, costly in terms of your time. But because we are also trying to make sure, that, we keep, not only good people, but, everything, is around how many votes you can get. How many votes you can get determines how many people are in your particular chamber who, believe as you do in terms of ideas and so forth, who believe in a democracy, and making sure that you have enough of those people there. So what we do once, when I ran for Congress 8 years ago, I think I raised close to $1 million. Now, for me, in local elections, it doesn't really cost that. But once you get there, you do have, a responsibility to help, make sure that we maintain, as we said, the majority. And so we pay dues, and it's not just Democrats, and Republicans do the same thing to try to keep their chambers. And you assess based on, your committees, your leadership positions, etc. So, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000. Some people pay even more. But, you've heard of call time. That's how we do it, to try to get people to support, by supporting, me, in my campaign. We're supporting our whole chamber, to make sure that we have the right people in the right place at the right time to do the right thing. So thank you, Ms. Hunter.
I just say that to say save the date, because on October 30th, I have volunteered to do a fundraiser, and I need to raise $10,000, and I need everybody's help in here. So I don't care if it's $1, $2, $10, $100. Mark that on your calendar, let me know today if you're interested, and bring a friend. I'll give you the details, only if you let me know. We can invite everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
You've been talking a lot about the HBCUs, and I applaud you as well, and admire everything that you're doing. But would you tell them a little bit more in detail on what the Black Caucus is doing for the students for these HBCUs, and this money that you are providing for them, for the students?
Okay, well, listen, we have, I wish I had all of the numbers, but I don't. But I will tell you that one of the things that, we talked about in terms of the cancellation was Pell Grants. We have, increased Pell Grants to now, I think it went from like $450 to about $600, per student. Now, again, the student has to meet a certain income, but we've had, millions of dollars, for our students, for scholarships, for them, as well as, well, we have loans available too, but basically scholarships, for students. We've done, a number of things in terms of improving, providing funding for, the improvement of the facilities on the campus, because we want the students to be able to, not only go to class, but to have the right equipment, to have the right professors, the people who have the expertise as well. So, I don't know if, me and my staff have that number, but it's up in over, about $60 million, that have gone to our schools and our students. Many of our students do, internships. There's funding, to provide it to do that. As a matter of fact, I have right now, during the last semester, I had 4 interns in, my office in DC who, are actually students at, HBCUs. One from North Carolina Central, one from, 2 from Howard. We have one from Johnson C. Smith University. We have them. So we are making funding available, for students, in many ways. And so, they can apply for that money directly to their schools, or they can apply through various grants. Do we have HBCU students in here that have already graduated? Yeah, we got a lot. Okay. Good for you. HBCU strong. Yeah, one's coming in the door, he's flying in the door, he's a yeah.
My question is, Congresswoman Adams, as you mentioned before, you're trying to figure out a way to get your grandson out of Howard because tuition is $60,000. And even here in Charlotte, Johnson C. Smith is roughly 34 a year. So with that said, especially with HBCUs doing a lot of the grunt work to build really resilient kids who are first generation students, how do we embrace that concept? At the same time, how do we save Howard? Because we can't go because of $60,000. What would be that compromise?
Well, I think we have to find ways to, I just believe that our schools need to not just survive, but they need to thrive. And thriving means more than just being able to repair that roof so the student can study in this building. I think we have to begin to form coalitions. We've got hundreds of thousands of graduates across this country who have really not been engaged and involved. So I think that it's a responsibility that we have to really find ways to reach out to them. I mean, we've got all kinds of networks, and of course today is not like it wasn't when I was coming along. We've got all of these technological networks that we can access to help. I don't have a cure-all for that, but I just think that we've got to keep talking the talk and making sure that not only others talk it, but that they walk it as well. But I just think, each one has to reach one. We've got to make sure that everybody knows what we know. And okay, so we got the money, we got for the maximum Pell Grant, has gone from 64.95 now to 6,890, almost 7,000, a little bit under 7,000. Now, when I was in school, I think Pell Grant was probably something about 3,000, maybe something like that. Legal saying too. But so, and we tried to, and even the president, I've talked to him about this a lot. We tried to double it. Matter of fact, I think we could triple it. But at least try to get it doubled, and that's what we're working on this year, but we want it. And let me just say that, everything is about compromise. And when I think back to 2006, some of you were probably just born then, but in 2006, I was a member of the North Carolina House. I worked for 10 years in the North Carolina House to get the minimum wage, the state minimum wage increase. At that time, it was $5.50 an hour. Can you imagine? $5.50. So anyway, we worked hard, and I wanted a $10, $12 increase. But anyway, we were only able to get $1. Then it went to $6.50, and then the federal government came in with the $7.25, and that's where we are today. And we ought to be ashamed of that. You can't survive on $7.25, and that's before taxes. Think about it. And so we have a bill in the Congress to increase the federal wage to $15. I think it needs to be 25 or 30. I mean, really. But again, you have to give some to get some. So hopefully we'll be able to give something through. But you have to have the right people. And I'll just say, let me just say and end on this. When good people go to the polls and vote for good people get elected. When good people don't go to the polls, or when they go to the polls and vote for bad people get elected to do bad things to good people. We have good people in our community, we have good people in our state who need to have some good results from the elected bodies who have been elected to serve. And so let me just end by saying that a community can only grow great when old men and old women plant trees under which we know we will never sit. So it's not about us in this room. It's about those who are not here, those who will sit under those shady trees long after we're gone. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, we got Mr. Colt there, Monty.
Mine was just a clarification, 1877.
It's 1837. I'm sorry, I forgot. That was the first HBCU, Cheney University. Yeah, I'm a little bit dyslexic, and I said 73, but it's 37.
It's 1877, I said.
All right, okay, right. You're right, thank you, yeah. Yeah, I did correct it, so.
Dr. Monty Willis-Moyer, first of all, I want to thank you for your work for HBCUs, with HBCUs as a graduate of Livingstone College in
All right.
Salisbury. But I want to talk about, this has to raise a question about K through 12 public education. It seems as though there's an intentional attack to really dismantle public schools. So I wonder, outside of the COVID funds, are there any long-term ideas generated to really support K through 12 learning in public schools? I know the states are, statutes and state funding and all of that, but at the federal level, is there, particularly as you think about Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, which is now mostly low income, high poverty schools, right? And of course, we can read into that several things. So is there anything at the federal level that is generating or maybe in the pipeline that can help?
Well, let me just say there are many things going on. Again, I sit on educated labor. I chair on the labor side, workforce protection. So my job is to look out for workers, make sure workers have what they need, that they're protected, that they're not working in heat, all those kinds of things. But on the other side, which is my training in education, I prepare teachers to teach in public schools. I went to public schools. My daughter is a public school principal in Greensboro Elementary School. So we talk education all the time. We're getting ready to look at all of our education programs, all of the funding that's available in terms of federal funding. We have all kinds of bills that have come through that committee to enhance funding for public schools. That you must know that the funding that we provide at the federal government goes to the states, and then the state filters that money down to the various counties, all 100 of them in North Carolina. So we can, if you will go to my website, you will see, and you can go to the education and labor website. You'll see, for example, all of the bills we talked about. Those our chair is Chairman Bobby Scott from Virginia, and we have several public. Matter of fact, we have on our committee Luana Hayes, who was the national teacher of the year. So that's something. K-12 education is something that not only we talk about all the time, but that we also try to provide funding. We've sent a lot of money here to Mecklenburg through the state, and yes, we do know the needs, and we do see the disparities. They've always been there, not just here, but across this country. But yeah, I am definitely a fan of public education.
All right, that's all the time we have. I will please ask if her staff will stand, and we please give Congresswoman Alma Adams and her staff. And if you have announcements, please send them to Steve.
I need to make the one about United Way. They were here last week, and, we recognized that there was challenges, but I want you to know that I did receive a phone call later that day, and I made myself available to be a part of their grant evaluation process. So I went to training the next day. They are interested for the next cycle of getting more people involved. So if you're interested, if we're gonna complain, then we need to be part of the solution.
Right.
So contact Catherine or Roz Jacob if you're interested in serving. They're looking for people, so we need to do that. And quickly, Louis Dowdy, whose father was president of A&T, passed this morning. And Vivian Williams, her service will be September 15th at 10 o'clock visitation, followed by the service at noon at Friendship.
We were supposed to be out of this room by 10, but we'll just wait till they kick us out. Go ahead.
If I make two announcements, that I will be in conference. On September 24th, she is hosting what we call our Service Academy Day, where we invite the military academies to come and speak to our students here in 12th District. And on September the 27th, she's having a listening session on the Adams Initiative and Farmville. So look for those announcements to come out on her behalf.
Mr. Gomes, quickly.
I just want to urge, and Congresswoman might also understand, there is an undercurrent that's going on. And as new appointments are being made through a variety of public agencies, state, local, it's called ALEC. That's the American Legislative Exchange Council. And as their people are being placed into a variety of areas, whether it be United Way or whether it be any other agency, understand that that's the Bible and the rule through which a lot of these new entities are being made, such as United Way. And if you go back and research the people who are being in these places, on the surface, they're smiling in your face and telling you it's raining, but you know it ain't raining. So understand, and Congresswoman, you might know better than I, the way ALEC works, and it's from the top to the bottom.
I'm real familiar with them, we gotta watch them. For those of you interested in the 27th annual Adams Mad Hatters, you can see me after the program, love to have you come, wear your favorite hat, men and women. And thank you for wearing your mask today. It's a good thing. Don't forget it, because as you leave to say your prayers, wash your hands. Jesus and germs are everywhere. Thank you.